Hello and welcome back to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be continuing our analysis and commentary on Vladimir Putin's speech, because Vladimir Putin is one of the most important world leaders in modern times, and he's telling us exactly the direction that Russia is going to be going in, and that will help us to understand the direction of the world, because Russia is really, to a very large extent, dictating what's happening in the world currently. So let's dig right in.
And gaining momentum. The Russian part of the audience are certainly aware that we have always been at it. How long are we going to be dependent on oil and gas? And it seems this trend is gaining momentum, but I'm still going to talk about oil and gas. There are some things worth taking note of. Secondly, the financial capabilities of our government give us a chance to stay the course towards social justice, reduction of poverty and inequality. Our main emphasis is an important factor of successful faring that we showed when dealing with the problems last year. And of course, if we look at the most disadvantaged citizens, we will see that their income over the year rose by 30% in 2021, 1.7 million.
Okay, so in terms of alleviation of poverty within nations, China and Russia do a far better job than the West does. You don't even really hear about the West talking about alleviation of poverty, despite the fact that there are so many poor people and now homeless people within the United States. There are some parts of cities, major cities in the United States, Seattle, Portland, the Silicon Valley area, Miami, New York City, where there's an overabundance of homeless people, and you don't really see the West talking about that at all. And that's because of the fact, I think it's an indication of, that Western leaders really don't care about their people. It's not about alleviating the suffering of its people. It's not about improving the livelihood of its people. It's about exploiting people, whether domestically or abroad, as much as humanly possible, or inhumanely as possible, is another way of putting it.
People managed to break through the poverty threshold, and the poverty rate stood lower than two-digit numbers, namely 9.8%. Of course, each and every percentage point is very important, and the positive trends that I have just spoken about in practical terms maybe are not as significant, especially for those people who've just crossed the poverty threshold. Their income is still very low, but still this is the general trend which we have to support and keep. We work at an accelerated pace to indexate the pensions and social benefits, increasing minimum wages and minimum subsistence level as a result. And the fourth quarter last year, our citizens' real disposable income started to grow again. So far, the growth is modest, but this is a trend nonetheless, and this year we wanted to get stronger. I hope that this will be the case.
And again, just talking about real disposable income of the people of their nation. In the West, we just say, like, well, if you don't have money to feed your family, just like go into more debt, get more credit card debt, things like that. Like, the West doesn't really care about its people. They want you to be completely indebted to the system. And at that point, like, I know this is a maybe radical thing for people to hear, but if you're so far in debt that you're constantly just paying off the interest on your debt and you have no way of actually, like, sustaining yourself, there's no chance that you'll ever be able to pass on anything, any inheritance to your children, things like that. Like, I want to be gentle when I say this, but how different from slavery really is that? Like, you're so far in debt that you just owe the bankers money, like endless amounts of money that you can never be able to pay off, whether it's student debt or healthcare debt or just debt to feed your family. It's like, I don't know how much of a difference is that. You don't have a choice. You don't actually have a choice. It's like, well, you could die or you could just be massively in debt for the rest of your life. Those are your choices. Like, how different from slavery actually is that? Because it gives you the same choices, as far as I can tell. And so the West just does not care about its people. In fact, it wants its people to be suffering as much as possible because suffering is profitable in the West.
Helps us support demand and this in turn internal production and services, especially enterprises and regions on the ground. This in turn has a positive impact upon regional budgets. The third principle I spoke about last year is the emphasis on the development of private initiative. Last year, there were predictions, glum ones, that under the pressure of sanctions, Russia would have to revert to a self-isolated command economy. But as you know, instead, we've chosen to expand the freedom of entrepreneurship, and life has demonstrated us that this has been the right choice. An important stimulus, an important impetus to our business is the replacement of transnational corporations that have left the Russian market. Unfortunately, they buckled under the strong political pressure of foreign political elites. You are very well aware we never chased anyone away from our market or from our economy. Quite the contrary, we proposed that they should weigh very carefully all pros and cons, think about their Russian partners as well as potential.
I suspect you're going to be seeing a lot of organizations and a lot of countries coming back to Russia with their tail between their legs because they thought this would be like a Venezuela or like an Iran, where the West just completely decimates the economy and causes a ton of suffering within the country. And Russia was not only resilient, but it thrived. And so these countries and these organizations are going to be like, actually, we want to be a part of that again. And it's going to be difficult. And you see a lot of organizations and a lot of countries going to the United States saying, listen, we don't really care about your sanctions. We want to work with these countries. You saw recently with the semiconductor bill. I mean, the United States has been trying to sanction China, and they ended up coming up with exemptions for Taiwanese and South Korean companies to continue to work on semiconductors in mainland China. And so you just see that, like, the United States is losing its influence, and these other countries are not willing to stop working with countries like Russia and China. And it's showing the dominance of Russia and China while also showing the weakness and lack of influence of the United States.
Potential consequences, and each and every partner of ours had a choice. But what's important, because the thing is, under many foreign brands and trademarks, products were being sold totally and completely produced based on Russian capacities. So basically, these are Russian goods bearing a foreign logo. So now that the owners of the trademarks have left, these goods are still being produced. Yes, the logo is different, and the revenues from this business stays in Russia. We will help new Russian owners, will provide income to the employees as well as to the related industries and contractors. First, our entrepreneurs were very anxious because of the withdrawal of Western companies, but right now they're taking up freed up spaces and malls and some small niche marks, as it were, that used to sell clothes, footwear, other goods through social networks are opening their own shops. I spoke about that at an event in Moscow. This sector.
So kind of hilarious that all these sanctions, all they really did was help the small businesses, family-owned businesses within Russia to thrive, and then to create more small businesses, family-owned businesses within Russia. So this vacuum was a benefit instead of a negative, and that has to be incredibly, incredibly embarrassing for the West.
Sector of the economy has seen the exodus of foreigners who freed up to 2 million square meters of surface. And also, this market is to the tune of 2 trillion rubles or so. And that's good because all of that has been replaced by Russian business people. Just during 1 year, last year, Russian producers filed more than 90,000 applications for trademark registration. Apart from clothes and footwear, this is mostly software, household chemicals, perfumes, and cosmetics. I won't open any secret to you because In the course of cooperation with Russian entrepreneurs, I hear requests not to let errant foreign companies back. This is the same thing that happened back in 2014 when Russian agricultural companies started to gain momentum. When we met with agricultural companies, they were asking us they were asking whether we would let foreign companies back. And they said, please don't let them back anytime, because we will do everything. And I have to be frank, our agricultural producers are quite successful. Last year, the growth in agriculture was at around 10% in all goods.
I think it is fair to say that some countries modernize faster than other countries, and they did historically. And so those countries have an advantage in an international economy. And so if their companies come in to your country, they have a competitive advantage because they have a longer time to adapt, gain experience, to be competitive in certain markets after industrialization had happened. And so it makes complete sense that you create a local homegrown system within a specific market before you allow foreigners to come in. China did that. Russia is currently doing that as well. I mean, they saw with their agricultural sector where it's like, well, don't let foreigners in who have a ton of money and a ton of resources, and they can outcompete your national domestic organizations, your companies within your country. And so we have to consider that and allow to cultivate a certain homegrown autonomy, self-sustaining culture, really. Things like agriculture, which he's talking about now, it's extremely important for the country. I mean, people need to eat, right? And so we need to make sure that that stuff is at least capable of being grown at home, that the technical expertise to do that is not just owned by foreign companies. And so growing that market, extremely, extremely, extremely smart strategy there.
We are satisfying all of our needs, and we're also exporting quite actively. Be that as it may, I can tell you that
So that's kind of interesting. I mean, he talks about it almost in passing. I mean, it was in passing. But he's saying that not only are they meeting the needs, the agricultural needs of their own country, but they're exporting it out. And so getting rid of that foreign competition actually helped them to be competitive on an international stage, not just domestically. And that's a huge deal. It shows that these foreign companies are really stifling creativity within nation states.
Good foreign producers desire to get back to our market, and such talks are becoming increasingly numerous. We are not closing the door. The door is still open. We are not afraid of competition, because competition, as is well known, is the driver of progress, and we will create a good environment.
Okay, so competition does drive progress, but guess what? If you have... What's a good example of this? I was thinking of the monkey example, which I've heard in science a lot, and you have like stronger and weaker monkeys, and if they're playing, I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about this example a ton of times, I believe it was. If you have monkeys playing and some are much bigger and some are much smaller, the larger monkeys have to let the smaller monkeys win sometimes. Otherwise, the smaller monkeys just give up, or they will band together to fight against the bigger monkey. But we're going to ignore that second part for right now. In reality, what he's saying here is if you have these bigger companies come in and they so overwhelm the smaller companies that are domestic might just give up. And so, sure, competition is important, but it has to actually be a competition. The difference between different companies, domestic and international, has to be relatively minuscule. So just as an aside, since I'm learning about content creation right now, I was looking at various computer parts and things like AMD versus Intel and AMD versus NVIDIA are competitive because of the fact that both the producers in GPUs and CPUs are relatively comparable. And so that helps the customers out because these two companies, either in the CPU or GPU market, are relatively similar in terms of qualifications, in terms of capabilities. And so if we want an actual competitive market, that doesn't mean you just let anything occur within your country. You have to make sure that the competition is fair, is roughly comparable, the international competition with the domestic companies. Okay, and so competition doesn't mean free for all. That's the main takeaway here.
For them in Russia. But the peculiarities of conduct of some of these partners, this is something we are going to keep in mind in future. And of course, we are going to prioritize the interests of Russian business. Incidentally, those who stayed and who are working and who want to continue working in Russia, well, we treat them as Russian producers and we will treat them as our own.
Okay, so this seems like a good stopping point, talking about competition and fostering a healthy domestic market so that they can be more competitive with international foreign companies. That is where we're going to end this. I believe it's part 4, and we'll be coming back with another segment of commentary and analysis on Vladimir Putin's speech in a little bit. If you enjoyed this video, please like the video on whatever platform you're on, and please subscribe to our channel for more content. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.